Okay, we'll start the webinar then. We just have a few people coming in there, so let's get into it. So we'll start the webinar. Thank you and welcome to another webinar from Nathan Trust. Today we're going to talk about the HR hot topics in 2022. Joining us, we have our HR expert, Christine Sutton. Hey, Christine, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me. No
problem, delighted. Just a bit of housekeeping. The webinar, as ever, will be recorded, and we will post the video on our website, on our YouTube channel, and then also email the recording to everybody that has attended and registered for it. So it's a Q&A webinar as well. So if you have any questions, please put them in the questions tab and we will do our best to answer them. So the earlier you get your question in, the better chance you have of it getting answered. So Christine, I know you did a PowerPoint, which is very helpful. So if you give me 1 minute, I'll share the PowerPoint, and I guess that'll give you an opportunity to get into the meat of what you're talking about. So I'm not sure you'll have control of this, but if you, I'm happy to take instructions to flick to the next webinar on it if that works. So. So there we are, hot topics for 2022. So do you want to get into hybrid working? It's over to you.
Yeah, I suppose just to kind of, I suppose start off, I think the world of work has changed dramatically and it continues to change, I suppose, at what can only be described as breakneck speed. And businesses are having to look at work in a much more holistic way. Consider the challenges that we have faced in the last couple of years, including the pandemic. We're now facing a lot more economic uncertainty, innovation, sustainability, technology, war for talent. So really good leadership in an organization is critical. So really what I wanted to do today is just to briefly look at a few topics that are current in HR at the moment. You could really spend a day almost on each of these topics, but we're going to cover them just very, very briefly. I would caveat today's session with the fact that HR is not a one-size-fits-all approach, and the approach that you need to take in your organization needs to be driven by the needs of your organization. So just because another business is taking a particular approach doesn't mean it's going to work for you. So proceed with caution and always consider what your organizational evidence and data is showing you. So just hybrid working is just, it is a hot topic. Lots of organizations have already implemented hybrid working, or they're doing a test it out and see approach. So it's very much that blended approach, spending time in the office and at home. And research is showing lots of employees are liking this, they want this. Previously, productivity was always viewed as butts on seat model, and hopefully we're moving much more towards that measurement of output rather than I'm in the office, so I must be doing work. And that busyness that we used to see, people kind of working really long hours, is no longer the badge of honor that it once was. So we've seen that massive swing towards finding a greater balance. So I think this potential for hybrid working allows people to choose the where and the when in terms of the work that they're doing. But what is important is I think organizations need to understand that this isn't going to be easy, and there are challenges, and you need to consider what the challenges are for your workplace. So some of those challenges might include, increased feelings of isolation and loneliness, whether that be at home or in the office. So if someone is working a lot of their time at home, what challenges will that bring? But equally, if someone turns up to the office and they might be maybe the only person in their team, what does that mean as well? And that might have an impact on social relations at work. Also, I think culture has almost changed to the fact we all have access to phones. So we've got that always on culture as well. So we need to always make sure that there are boundaries between work and home. if you're working at home. Also, the reinforcement of existing workplace inequalities. So this is definitely one to watch, especially because, you know, you want to ensure that those people that are maybe in the office a lot more, near supervisors and leaders, are not unfairly advantaged because of that proximity. So think about your approach to hybrid working. What's going to work for your business? So that flexibility, consider the needs of both the employer and the employee, and don't assume that they are the same. And do a regular review as to how this is impacting the business, how it's impacting employees. Is your approach going to be a rigid hybrid? And by that, I mean, do you have set days that you require people to be in the office? Everybody must be in, you know, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or a flexible hybrid approach. We want you in 1 or 2 days a week and you decide. Development, I think a lot of employees have gotten used to the digital platforms that we're now working off, but just make sure that employees can meet those changing needs. So the training and development, again, should not privilege those physically present. Review those training needs regularly. Develop a plan, use multiple methods for development, and review their impact as well. Finally, just another principle I want to touch on. Sorry.
Yeah, no, just when we look at the kind of the hybrid thing, obviously you have the remote and you have the in-office, and we've seen how companies like Spotify, who are a fully remote solution, and they've been super successful for a number of years. And then you have, and they like might employ 600-700 people in Ireland, but they don't have an office. And then you might have the normal businesses pre-pandemic, which had everybody in the office all the time, and there's no end of them that have been very successful as well and have had good culture and good relationships with their employees and things like that. But is the hybrid thing really, are we literally figuring this out as we're doing it at the moment?
Yes, I think so. And I think a lot of organizations, and certainly a lot of people that I've been working with over the last year, are doing it as let's test this out, see for us. And all, if it's not working, it's okay, we can change it. I think that is a critical approach, and that's why I say, you know, communication and reviewing how this is working for you is critical. So don't just kind of think, right, well, we've done it now. It's a case of, right, let's try this out for a couple of months, come back, review it, see if it needs any changes, but always be flexible about it. It has to meet the needs of both the business and the employee. And you want to make sure that you're regularly checking on people's experiences of remote working. I think the pandemic, it did highlight the fact that some people really enjoyed working remotely, and some people want to continue to do that 100%. And if that works for them, if that works for the business, that's fine. Other people are like, no, I want to be in the office 100% of the time. So you really have to be flexible where there is a whole spectrum of possibilities in terms of how people work. And that's where I talk about this ability to measure bums on seats and ability to kind of determine when do we need or want to be together as an organization. And that's why I talk about being purposeful in our work. So just because somebody, you know, is it purposeful for somebody to commute to the office only to spend their whole day shut off in a meeting room on conference calls all day? So it's about, why are we in the office? Is it because we're meeting with clients? Is it for coaching purposes, collaboration, or some kind of celebration? So we need to ensure that we're doing that with purpose, that we're not doing it just because. So what's your reason for doing it? And I've added, I think this made the news. I'm not sure if everybody has seen it, but there's a picture there from Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Yeah, he's a nice guy,
isn't he? Parliament in Britain. Yeah, absolutely. But the reason I've put this in is because your practices reflect on your culture. And I think this to me is quite a passive aggressive note. And for me, it would represent a culture that perhaps doesn't trust people and it implies that because they're in the office, they're not working.
Yeah, well, it's kind of, he's Minister for Contradiction in Terms as well, which is Brexit opportunities and government efficiency. So, you know,
and I think
whoever
we've
came up with
very
that
much
department
demonstrated over the past number of years. Absolutely. But yeah, so that very much for me, your practices represent your culture. So your approach to hybrid working will reflect.
And does that
as well.
Does that not allude to a very, and it's a difficult thing to do. So if you're a business that had bums, you're a bums on seat business, which was most businesses pre-pandemic, and now you're in some hybrid, you're looking at a hybrid solution. If you as a business do not look to create new methodologies for tracking productivity or tracking how your people are performing, if you're using the same methodologies that you did when you were a bums on seats business, you're setting yourself up to fail, or you're setting yourself up for trouble, aren't you?
Yeah, well, a lot of businesses have adopted technology fairly quickly, and I think that's been a big driver, and it's been really advantageous for businesses adopting some of that technology to ensure that output and productivity has remained the same. Some businesses have reported, an increase in productivity because of the shift. But I think businesses need to be flexible, and this is the biggest, the most important message, because if someone wants to do hybrid working, they want to work remotely, they want to work 100% in the office, a business needs to be flexible, because if you're not, and you're not giving the employee what they want, they're going to go and find it elsewhere. Yeah,
that's the bottom line, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, do you want to jump to the next one?
Yeah, absolutely. So in another kind of hot topic, and I suppose you have to consider, what do you mean by well-being? What does it mean for your organization? And for the people in your organization, because again, that's going to be different for everybody. I think I want to start by just saying what well-being isn't for me within a business. And for me, it's not about motivational workshops. It's not about gym passes and exercise classes. It's not about funky breakout spaces or fruit platters and smoothies. What is evident, and what the research shows, is that 41% of employees experienced mental health symptoms that were caused or made worse by work in the last year. So, as I said at the start, you need to look at your own organisation and what you need. So don't be taken in by current trends until you've looked strategically at where you're at and what you need. And you do that by asking people. So that's where you start. But in terms of well-being, something that is multidimensional. So looking at it in layers. What we need to do is we're going to look at symptom, because of, you want to look at what obviously support the person through that, but also look and see, right, well, what is it at an organizational level that's potentially contributing or exacerbating these symptoms. So I think this is just one model of employee well-being. There are lots of other ones out there, and again, people but I like the multidimensional, and I think leadership is at the center of it, because leaders need the jobs who role into management and embedding well-being into your organization, but also creating good work and working conditions that can enhance employee well-being. So what I would recommend for people to do, again, you need to assess where you're at within your organization, and you do that by reviewing what the risks are. What are the mental health risks in your workplace? And you develop a plan for minimizing those. So again, regularly reviewing that, and always include employee feedback on it as well. I think what isn't necessarily, organizations don't necessarily pay a lot of attention to this, is that managers have a critical role in wellbeing. A lot of these programs are driven by HR, and I'm not sure that's actually, it's not necessarily HR's responsibility. They can certainly advise and facilitate, but managers have a critical role because they are the ones that have a significant influence on employees' work. And unfortunately, they can be a contributor to the stress because of their behaviour. So what you want to do is make sure that the prioritization of good mental health is a core competency for people managers. You want to recognise the managers that show empathy and compassion. I think that's really critical.
Employee well-being comes up again and again in all the the surveys and the hot topics for multiples of generations, not just millennials, but multiples of generations of workplace. This is really, people are super focused on this at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. So lots of people are looking, and again, it's great to see organizations are looking beyond those superficial things that I said at the beginning, and really looking at it from an organizational perspective, and not just from an individual level. So it's really, assessing where you're at as an organization, find suitable interventions that fit with the problems you have identified, implement those solutions in collaboration with everyone in your organization, and evaluate the impact. So it's that kind of continual cycle that you want to kind of look at achieving and look at implementing in your company.
Okay, very good. We jump to the next one.
Yeah.
The learning and development. So 94% of employees say they would stay at a company longer for this reason, and it's not a raise. So is that employee training, or is it kind of development in promotions or new things to do, just variation, or is it all of the above?
A lot of it is all of the above, but what this research, and it was LinkedIn that did this research, they said that they would stay at the company longer if it's simply invested in helping them learn. So that learning obviously could be, doing cross-functional work, additional development opportunities, career pathing, seeing progression within the organization. So their research found that it was roughly a quarter of Gen Z and millennials saying that learning is the #1 thing that makes them happy at work. So I think that is, that's crucial. And I think L&D have seen a massive, they've really been put into the spotlight over the last year or so as well, because I think we've heard a lot about the Great Resignation, and LinkedIn have dubbed it the Great Reshuffle. But what is really apparent is that people are kind of stopping and reviewing what they want from their careers, and that's why we're seeing so much shift happening. So organizations are investing a lot in reskilling and upskilling. And I think too many organizations have what is called the accidental manager. So the accidental manager is someone that's perhaps been promoted because of their competence, their technical competence, and not necessarily because they're a good people manager.
So a question here with the learning and development, like, should an organization, I suppose this question could be right, both questions could be right, but is it better to have an organization that lets the employee, encourages the employee to come at them with, listen, I'd really like to learn about this, as opposed to an organization where the management are saying, we've got an area here we think you'll be well suited to, do you want to further develop your skills in it?
I think it's a bit of both. You have to have it coming from both sides, but I think organizations need to determine, again, a lot of it is about what the organization needs. So I'd never kind of advise an organization to, oh, here's a great thing that you guys could do, without first assessing and analysing what the needs are. So you need to understand the skills and the competencies that are required in your business, and you do that through a needs analysis assessment. And then you can assess, well, what skills do people currently have and where is that gap, before you look at any kind of intervention. And, you know, again, we are starting to really look at leadership, and the pandemic has enabled us, or hopefully enabled us, to step back from a lot of micromanagement that went on. And we need to shift how we're looking at leadership. So promoting people based on competence and integrity, and, you know, managers that have a bit of compassion, rather than, I suppose, previously what we saw in a lot of leader behavior was confidence, charisma, and, dare I say it, narcissism. So I think that would be a good starting point in shifting what are the key skills for a good leader. And for me, emotional intelligence is right up there. So it's really a manager who is self-aware, who understands how they express themselves, how they are perceived by people, how they express their thoughts, how they can develop relationships with the people around them, cope with challenge and stress, and use kind of that emotional information in a really meaningful and effective way. And that, to me, is one of the #1 skills that a manager can possess today, as well as, you know, I think communication. It's a bit cliche, but it's probably the thing that people are not great at. It's honest and open dialogue, and actually listening to what people are saying in order to have good relationships at work.
Okay, so yeah, employee or management training is always a key component to all of this, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're seeing more and more people kind of reaching out to us and asking about, you know, what can we do, and especially around that emotional intelligence area. So more and more people are reaching out, looking for different types of solutions towards developing managers, and emotional intelligence is definitely one of them. And so, you know, we touched on it a little bit about how HR tech is really helping us embrace this new kind of digital remote working era. And we've seen organizations adopt new technology. And I think it's really an area that's exploded in terms of engagement as well. So we want to make sure that we can stay connected and engage employees both in the office and at home. So to do that, a lot of people are using, you know, they're moving towards artificial intelligence and people data usage. I suppose it was traditionally in the remit of HR, but it's really moved from HR to more line managers. They want to see more than just in the employee history. They want to understand productivity, engagement, skills, learning, performance. Is this person at risk of exit? And how can we use that to make better operational decisions, better financial decisions as well? So that is really, really critical. And there are some fantastic apps out there to help people. I think a lot of the people that are coming into the workforce now have grown up with technology. They've grown up with instant feedback, and that's what they expect. And that's what they expect in the workplace as well. And there are a lot of apps that will help organizations and managers do this, from taking weekly temperature checks of the organization or weekly, you know, check-ins. How's your team doing? But one thing, again, I kind of say, proceed with caution, because we want to ensure that we keep that human element in our work and in our work relationships as well, and that it's not all just done through technology. We want to ensure that our data usage doesn't overstep in terms of that tracking, or perhaps introducing bias into how we recruit and select people. Too often we actually do rely on figures rather than actually taking the time to stop and ask people how they're doing. I think that's crucial, that we find a good balance between use of technology, but retaining the human element in the work that we're doing.
Yeah, I think is it with the next generation too, that, you know, like we talked about, stay bums on seats companies. If you companies that have a lot of paper-based processes, and they're trying to deal with Gen Zs, or I think you'd have a lot of pushback. I think Gen Zs would be utterly frustrated by not having technology-driven solutions to day-to-day work. Would that be fair?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think a lot of organizations are looking at, and again, there is an app to fit. I think there would be an app or a technological solution to fit every company, depending on where they're at, whether or not they'd be light touch in terms of engagement, or, you know, teams kind of doing little check-ins with one another, to organizations that will look around gamification in performance management, etc. So there is something that will suit everybody. You just have to do your research and again find something that fits your organization.
I think that brings us on to kind of the broader employee
I wanted
experience.
to finish. Yeah, and I kind of wanted to finish on this particular one. And again, there's so much that is current at the moment, but again, we would spend all day talking about them all. But everything that we've just spoken about is linked to the overall employee experience. And I think organizations previously maybe just relied on benefits, and we've got a great benefits package to attract and retain people in the company. And whilst, yes, that's important to have good benefits, it might be an initial attraction, but what's going to keep them there? And I think when you join an organization, you want to feel that you're joining a community and an organization where the work, where you and the work you do matters. So do people understand your organizational purpose? Why does your organization exist? What are the values and the culture within this organization? And also what are the organizational strategy? What do we want to achieve, and how do we do this? It's really important that people in the company know this and can answer that question. So I think that's something that people should ask themselves. Would my team know this if I asked them? And I guess I've worked in a lot of organizations that would have values on their websites. They're very clear about these are the values in our organization, and they've got nice words on walls that espouse their company culture. But, you know, from my experience and from discussions with colleagues, quite often the behaviour accepted would contradict those values. So that's why I kind of, and I've said it before, that the culture of an organisation is shaped by the worst behaviour a leader is willing to tolerate. So that your organisation ultimately, and I've said this again, leaders need to be intentional and they need to be self-aware. So if the behaviours at leadership level don't match your organisational values, it really is a little bit pointless having values.
And does that tie in with the mission statement as well? We hear a lot about businesses having clear missions as well. Is that equally as important?
Yeah, and I think it all goes to your purpose. I think people want to know what is the organization's purpose and how do I fit this bigger picture? So if you state your organizational values and your mission, you need to live them. Because if your values don't align with what people experience in the workplace, they're going to select themselves out of it and find another organization that matches their values more closely. And I think a lot of people will look at the organizational, they'll look at your website, they'll look at reports you've produced to see what type of company you are. There's an awful lot of websites out there that highlight what people's experience is, like Glassdoor, where people are reviewed on what it is like to work in that company. So you really need to ask yourself, what's it like to work in my organization? and, you know, what's good about it, what's bad about it, and be able to work on what's bad about it, but also be able to use what's good about it as a selling point, as, you know, making it a really positive employee experience. Sorry, I've lost you, Philip. I can't hear you.
Okay, sorry, just muted myself there. Apologies.
Yeah.
Right at the end. So I think that's a good way to wrap it. That's just over the 30 minutes, 33 minutes, which is as long as we normally go on these. So I think very insightful, lots of actions. As I said, we'll put the video up on the YouTube where people can look at it in their own time. But thanks a million, Christine, for your time. Really, really insightful and really useful.
Thanks, Philip.
Brilliant. All right. Thanks again, everybody, for attending, and we'll see you next time.